Well, looks like Blumhouse returns yet again to scam you out of your hard earned money with their latest failure, Imaginary. Sound cool? Because I'm here to talk about Imaginary, released just this week. This was directed by Jeff Wadlow, a pretty, I'd say a steady working director, producer, and writer. And I can hardly say that I was familiar with his work prior to this film. The only thing he ever directed that I was familiar with was Kick-Ass 2 from 2013, which was a disappointment compared to the first one, in my opinion. It was okay, at best. So he co-wrote this with two other writers that I'm also completely unfamiliar with. And I was completely unfamiliar with all the actors here, so I'm not really going to go into that. So don't get me wrong, sometimes things just click, and magic happens when you least expect it, and well, it certainly didn't happen here, not remotely. I mean, as much as I at times bash Blumhouse, they have had their name attached to some films that I have really enjoyed. Maybe it's just like a quality control issue I have, because when they back stuff like this and Night Swim right around the same time, I mean, that's not a good look for anybody. I mean, it seems like Jason Blum has a quantity over quality mindset, and while I have no respect for that, I'm sure his fucking bank account has like 12 more zeros than mine does. And yeah, I think you already know where I'm going with this. The movie's bad. And it's not like I didn't see the red flags or anything. First off, the original trailer was terrible. I mean, the only reason I even went to see this was because I have a Regal Unlimited pass, and there's just not much else out right now. And second, I tend to have an issue with PG-13 horror films. I don't need anyone playing it safe, intentionally just to try to make a few extra bucks. I don't need watered down art. That said, okay, there have been some good PG-13 movies, even in the horror genre. Fine. I should probably get to the actual plot because I've seen the statistics, and they tell me that most of you have already stopped watching at this point. So let's move this along, shall we? So you have Alice as the main character. She's a little kid living with her teenage sister, her dad, and her kind of new-ish stepmom. And let me tell you now, these are all cliched, boring characters with no charisma or chemistry with each other. She has been through some traumatic events recently involving her mom's mental health issues, but that isn't really gone into any detail for the most part, but still sad. Her sister is kind of just your average, rebellious teen, nothing to talk about there. Her dad is the most cliched of them all. Oh boy, I mean, he's a nice fellow with a British accent for some reason. He's your typical version of what Hollywood writers think is a cool guy. He's got a carefree attitude, man. He wears all kinds of bracelets and t-shirts with cassette tapes screen printed on them. Oh, and he's some sort of musician, of course. I would have to intentionally try to write characters this lame. Then there's the stepmom, Jessica, who I guess is actually kind of the main character, really. I don't know, between her and the little girl. Whatever, they're both the leads, I guess. I hated her the most, I gotta say. So she's like a fairly successful children's book author and illustrator, and she is totally full of herself. To me, she just comes across as that, the marginally talented person who somehow found success and now thinks that they are this like unbelievable talent. The way she talks about her work, made me eye roll so hard I thought my eyeballs were literally just gonna pop out. I think that she's kind of really supposed to be like the hero here, and that you're supposed to sympathize with her or for her, but all I saw was ego and pretentiousness. So after moving her new family into her childhood home, and hopefully giving everyone a new life together, Alice starts to play with an imaginary friend in the form of a stuffed bear named Chauncey. I mean, Jesus, even the bear's name is cliched. Chauncey? Really? At first, Alice and Chauncey just play together doing kid things, but things take a darker turn and Jessica is concerned. And she has to take matters into her own hands because the kid's dad is on tour. I mean, of course he is. Of course he's on tour. I don't even remember the guy's name, if he even had one. I assume he did. Jessica calls some psychiatrist or something, one that is experienced with supernatural stuff, one with an exotic accent and a deep, husky voice, of course. Believe me, you already saw that coming, I assure you. I'm going to keep this relatively spoiler-free, but there are, a few twists and turns, some that I saw coming, some I didn't. This movie sucks, and it's super cliched, like I said a bunch of times already, but I didn't find it like borderline unwatchable, like I did with Night Swim at least. I don't think it's like completely boring necessarily, if that's a positive that I can bring to the table here. I mean, I'll never watch this again. Once was more than enough. But if you have kids wanting to get into horror, this is like a decent entry level watch. It felt like a long Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. It's got that kind of after school special feel to it. It was filmed on a $13 million budget, and it does look pretty cheap at times. There's a few monsters, which I'm all for, but they look terrible, one in particular. And for a film called Imaginary, it ironically seemed to have no imagination at all. I mean, you could literally storyboard this thing in an hour or two, I feel like. The supernatural realm called the Never Ever, that's the best they could do. Anyways, I mean, unless you have kids or you have an extremely low bar for quality, don't waste your time with this. There are just so many other things you could be watching that you wouldn't regret. Stream it if you must, but just don't give Blumhouse your money. Not this time. I'm going to give Imaginary I'm just going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's completely average in every possible way, at best. I could probably lower it to a 4.5. I'm going to go with a 5. So, I don't know, man. Don't watch it. Cheers, guys.